0. Hey, everybody, and welcome to Night 4. I am Mark. I am your host, and I will be your guide. And we are going to do review tonight, look over the stuff we went over the other night. We spent a lot of time looking at exposure, aperture, and shutter, and how that works. And if I did my job correctly, everybody is totally confused. Because it is an extraordinary amount of information to try to get through. And it's really, really dense stuff. And it's the kind of thing you have to sit with, and you can read about it, and it helps to read about it. Everybody has their own way of learning, and I think you're going to find that learning about the aperture and the shutter and how they work together and how they create and control exposure is going to require that you sit down with your camera and look through it, look at the viewfinder, figure out what your information your meter is giving you, and adjust your meter up or down to make it work. And if you do that, when you finally load film into your camera, it's going to make a lot of sense. So we'll do a quick review of that in a little bit. I'm going to do a quick review of the parts of a camera, and then I'm going to do just a quick kind of a real short 10-minute history of photography lesson. And then after break we'll get into our first assignment. I have the assignment posted on Blackboard, and I have some new links on Blackboard as well. The assignment title is Poet of Prague, and it will make sense as we get through the introduction later tonight. This is going to be a little bit more sensible in terms of what you see. And again, I've got this saved as a PDF, so you can put it on your phone on a tablet and have it with you, and also saved as a movie that you can run and flip through. Okay. So first thing we're going to look at when we're looking at camera parts are the big parts, and we spent the last few nights talking about the big parts. And the first big part is the lens. And the lens is, important for a couple different reasons. The lens is the thing that it shapes and focuses the light as it enters the camera. And we're going to spend a night looking at lenses and how different lenses affect the recording of the image. But what every lens will have in common is the aperture inside. And the aperture is the hole that opens and closes. Open and close. Open and close. To either increase the intensity of the light coming through, decrease the intensity of the light coming through. It's always open, even at its smallest opening. There it is. See, there's a tiny, tiny, tiny little pinhole there. And I can open it up. Lots of intensity. Close it down. A little bit of intensity. So that's the aperture. Aperture controls the intensity. Aperture is contained inside the lens. Okay. The other big piece, the other big part is the shutter. And the shutter is inside, in the back of the camera. And the shutter is that curtain that opens and closes and allows light to pass through. So the shutter opens and then it closes. Open, and it closes. Open and closes. We can control the amount of time that the shutter is open. The general shutter speeds, shutter time, shutter speeds, run on a range from 1 second at the longest to 1/1000th of a second at the shortest. So one of the first little controllers, things you want to understand is the focus ring on the side of the lens. Now, on these old mechanical lenses, the focal range, the focal, it measures, it tells you how far away your focus is. So whether you're focused 2 feet away, 4 feet away, it's got meters and feet markings on it. And the old mechanical lens, it's all right there. All right, it's right on the lens. On electronic cameras, let's say an autofocus camera that you press the button and the camera focuses automatically. Sometimes you don't have that information on the lens. They don't even bother printing it on the lens. Some more expensive lenses will have that focus range information printed on it, but not all cameras will. It just gives you an idea if you're focused where you think you're focused. The older mechanical cameras will have a film advance lever. If you have an autofocus camera, you'll notice that your camera doesn't have a film advance lever, all right? Because with a more advanced, with the autofocus cameras, you press the button, camera takes a picture, and the camera automatically, there's a motor drive built into the camera, automatically powers it forward to the next photograph. And I don't have an example of an electronic camera to show you. I have 3 of them, and they all were signed out to students last spring, and I'm afraid I'm never going to see any of them again. So I'm going to have to get on eBay and start buying some new old cameras. Now the film advance lever, if you have a camera that's got the film advance lever, the thing to pay attention to on a lot of cameras is that when the film advance lever is pushed all the way in against the body of the camera, it turns the meter off. So nothing works if that's closed. You have to pull it out and wind this and keep it pulled out, and now my meter is active and I can take the photograph. So your camera might be a little bit different. Every camera, some cameras actually have an on and off switch for the meter. Some cameras, you press on the shutter release, it turns the meter on, the meter stays active for 30 seconds and shuts itself off. That's why you want to have a manual for your camera, so you can look at your individual device and understand what it does and what it doesn't do, what it's capable of, what it's not capable of, because it's your tool for this semester. And a phrase I've learned to love over the years: if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So continuing with the controls on the top deck of the camera. This is the film rewind knob. Now on the old cameras, you can see there's that little silver lever, which is actually a handle, which will come out. Let's see, there it is, right there. And that little handle is how you wind the film back in. There's a little arrow on the top here that shows you which direction to wind. You can see it in the illustration. It's kind of a clockwise turn to rewind the film back in, right here. On the electronic camera, it doesn't have a manual rewind. You see, you turn your picture mode, you turn your mode all the way over, so you bring that little symbol right there that looks like film running back in, is exactly what that does. And you turn it to the white line, and then you press the shutter release, and zip, it'll it'll suck your film right back into the tank. So you don't have to do much of anything. ISO control on the manual cameras, they're in different places on different cameras. This camera, the ISO setting is here. On some cameras, it's actually built into the same dial as the shutter speed. You'll find it on your camera. On an electronic camera, you use this double setting for the rewind and the ISO, and then you turn your scroll wheel and you can change your ISO. But once you set it, it's set it and forget it. All right, so this film's got this little silver and black barcode on it. I put that film in my camera, in an automatic camera, and it automatically reads the ISO on the film, and the camera sets itself, which is really nice. Okay, so I mean those are the things that the basic kind of getting into what's happening here. So still looking at the controls that you see looking down at the top. On the olden kind of camera, the ring on the lens that's closest to where the lens mounts to the body is the aperture ring. All right, so I can, if I hold this lens and turn the aperture ring, that's what sets my aperture from f2 to f22. This, what do we go down here? Yeah, this goes to f1.8. So from this one from f1.8 to f22, and that setting is right on the lens. On a manual focus camera like this, you normally find that on the lens. On a autofocus electronic camera, you'll get an indicator here, so you'll be able to see what your aperture is. But setting your aperture is a little bit different. I'll show you that. I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so where would we be at here? Shutter speed dial is generally in the same place on all mechanical cameras. Shows the shutter speed from 1 second all the way up. This one goes all the way up to 4/4,000th of a second. That's pretty impressive. And this one, see that the ISO meter's right in here. That little guy right there. So there's a little dial on the side you turn. And then on this camera there's an indicator of the shutter speed. But we actually set the shutter speed by rolling this scroll wheel right here. So that scroll wheel is going to change our shutter speed, and then we get an indication of the shutter speed in this top deck LCD dial. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Shutter release. Press the button, trips the shutter. This camera's does the soft touch button. You touch it really lightly and it focuses and does the metering, and then you press it a little more and it engages the shutter. Come on. Film counter tells you how many photographs you've taken. So you look at it and you know how many photographs that you've taken. Now, interesting thing on the electronic cameras. These are the ones they're kind of self-loading and self-unloading, and very often, what the camera will do, you'll put your in the old cameras. You drop your film in and you click and you wind, you click and you wind. When you get to the end of the roll, you wind the film back into the can. But the film counter lets you know how many you've used or how many you have left. The mechanical cameras don't have this. The electronic cameras do. These are your like picture settings, your operation modes. The L is lock. That's the camera's turned off. P is for program. The camera will meter. It'll set the shutter speed and aperture by itself. The TV. It's an old nomenclature. It refers to what's called time value. It's called shutter priority. You set the shutter speed. Camera will pick the correct aperture so that you have correct exposure. The AV is the opposite, is the aperture mode. You set the aperture, camera will choose the correct shutter speed so that you have correct exposure. Manual, where you get to do it all yourself. This is automatic depth of field. Don't worry about that. You'll never, ever, 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 ever use it. And then the ISO setting and the film rewind setting. Those are the program modes on the modern cameras. This LED display gives you all the information. You can see there's the exposure scale, 0, +1, +2, -1, -2. This little box right here with the 3 dots, that's your metering mode or your focusing mode. It tells you how your camera, because your camera is auto-focusing. All right, so it's choosing what it's focusing on: battery level, shutter speed, aperture, and there's no film in this camera. I'm assuming because there's no film exposure number on it right now. All right, so you move to the front. Both these cameras have a little button in the front. That little button is the lens release. You push that button in, turn your lens, and it comes off. All right. That's awesome. Bottom of the camera. If you have a mechanical camera, it's critical. That little button on the bottom, you press that in. Puts all the gears, all the film advance gears, puts them all in neutral. So that rewind button, you push that in, and then you rewind your film. Both cameras have a tripod mount. It's a standard 1/4 inch by 20 thread. I mean, it's standardized across all cameras, all tripods. On the bottom of the camera, there's your battery access door. There's your battery access door. Okay, looking through the back, the viewfinder, that's where your eye goes, and you look through and you can see inside. You'll see your focusing screen. You will see your meter.